King Nebuchadnezzar was the powerful ruler of the vast Babylonian Empire. Within the royal court were people of many different nations and customs, people who had been conquered and then chosen to help King Nebuchadnezzar rule his empire. One day, King Nebuchadnezzar summoned the rulers of the various provinces to gather together. He watched them assemble from his royal pavilion. This was a special occasion, and no one would dare not to come. The king stood up. The great moment had arrived. Trumpeters sounded a fanfare, and the herald, whose job is to make the royal announcement, stepped forward with the big scroll in his hand. The captains, princes, and governors all stood quietly, waiting to hear the announcement from the king. All people, nations, and languages hear the king's command. The herald announced. Then he went on to say that the king had made a gigantic statue in his own likeness. The statue was 90 feet, 30 meters tall, and made of gold. This was to be their god. At the sound of the musical instruments, everyone was to bow down and worship the golden image. The next thing they heard put fear in the hearts of the bravest men. Anyone who does not fall down and worship the image of the king shall be immediately thrown into the fiery furnace. So when the music instrument played, the people fell down and worshipped the golden statue, just as the king had commanded. Two Chaldeans were worshiping close together when suddenly one of them saw something that made him tug at the other one's robe in an effort to get his attention. "Look," the Chaldean said, "it's just as we thought. The three of them, see? They are not bowing down. They are refusing to worship the golden image." The Chaldean was right. Three young princes, the rulers of the capital city itself, were openly disobeying the king. The three men had been brought captives from the distant land of Judah. Their names had been changed, but because of their abilities, they had been given high positions in the kingdom. Hananiah, meaning beloved of God, was called Shadrach, or Circuit of the Sun. Mishael's cherished name was changed from one who is like God to the heathen name Meshach, meaning sun god. And Azariah, whose name meant the Lord is my helper, came to be known as Abednego, the god of commerce. Nebuchadnezzar may have changed their names, but their hearts remained the same. These men believed in the Lord God Almighty, and to bow down before an image was something God had told them never to do. The two Chaldeans lost no time in reporting what they had seen to the king. They were jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they slyly reminded the king that these men who had refused to bow down were the very men the king had placed over the affairs of Babylon. "How dare these men disobey me?" shouted the king. "Bring them here at once." Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were hurried to the royal pavilion. And when the king asked them if it was true they had not bowed down to the golden image, they told him it was true. So the proud, mighty ruler of the Babylonian Empire decided to give the men a second chance to bow down before the image. If they did, he would forgive them. The brave young men replied, "Our God is able to deliver us, but even if he chooses not to, we will never serve your gods or worship the golden image." The king was furious. He commanded the furnace to be heated up 7 times hotter. And he ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be taken to the furnace and be put to death for their willful disobedience. It wasn't long before the furnace was made 7 times hotter than it usually was, and the 3 young Jewish men were securely tied. Then one by one were thrown in the midst of the flames. Shadrach, whose real name meant beloved of God, was thrown into the flames. Meshach, whose Jewish name meant one who is like God, was hurled into the furnace. Abednego, whose real name meant the Lord is my helper, joined them. When the soldiers had thrown them into the furnace, they turned to run from the terrible heat. But the flames leaped out of the blazing furnace and burned them to death. And then the king saw something that had made him jump to his feet. He could not believe his eyes. Forgetting about his dignity, the king ran with the rest of the people to get a better look. "Look," shouted the king, "do you see what I see? Didn't we throw 3 men who were bound into the flames? I see 4, and they are loose and walking around. The 4th man looks like the Son of God." King Nebuchadnezzar knew in his heart that the Lord God Almighty was the true and living God. He called for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to come out of the fire. The people were amazed as the 3 Hebrew boys walked out of the furnace unharmed. Not a single hair was singed. They did not even smell like smoke. King Nebuchadnezzar fell to his knees and cried, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has delivered his servants who trusted in him." Shortly afterwards, a new decree was read to all the nations under Nebuchadnezzar's rule. No one was to speak against the God of the 3 brave Jewish men. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were promoted to high places within the kingdom, but their real happiness was in their freedom to worship God.